organisations, and also from individuals just wanting to do great things in your communities, but also potentially from different groups and schools. So I'm excited. I hope that what I'll be able to bring to you today has uses for a lot of different spaces. So while I am from Lottery West and coming at you from a grants organisation, we're going to take this session to be a little bit more, let's call it grants agnostic. So most of the work that I actually do is work with the organisations and local governments around Western Australia to upskill them around, I guess, some of the tools and strategies around social impact and how you actually measure social impact across your communities. So that for me is kind of it's an awesome job. I always say I have the best job at Lottery West because I get to go all over WA and work with amazing people like yourselves to create great impact in the community. So who could have a better job than that, really? But what I want to share with you today is some of the tools that we've created, because we've created them to kind of lift all ships. They weren't really created just for people going for Lottery West grants. They were created for the whole sort of impact community to enable us all to sort of have access to some free tools and services and resources that potentially some of our smaller not-for-profits and individuals and community groups might not have access to without big funding. So I'm hoping that these things will be helpful, and I will leave a bit of time at the end in case you've got questions for me. But I'll share my screen. Let's see if I manage this one. Let's go slideshow. Let's go from beginning. Amazing. Okay, I'm hoping you can see my slideshow there. So, what we do at Lottery West is mainly we give grants, right? You guys all know that. So this is the community investment framework under which we do that. Now you can see from this slide that it's actually a pretty broad framework. Those 5 pillars across the top, or 4 really, if you look at the blue ones, pertain to the kind of highest level priority aspirations of Lottery West, if you like. So inclusive, thriving community, connected cultural experiences, protected sustainable ecosystems, and smart innovative society. And I know that for a lot of you online today, some of those things will be very, very relevant to the work that you do in the communities. Now, the red one there, active, healthy people, that pertains more to our partnership with Healthway, although we do use some of the outcomes that sit below those priority areas against our own programs as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about outcomes today, specifically sort of in light of the fact that when you do go for a Lottery West grant or a Healthway grant, we do ask you to demonstrate how you've met those outcomes. But what you'll probably find is working in the kinds of areas that you are, anytime you go for a grant or even a sponsorship or a philanthropic kind of grant, you'll find that they're moving towards outcomes measurement. So they'll be asking you to be able to say to them, how successful were you and how do you know you were successful? So what are the measures against which you're measuring that success? So that's what we're going to work through a little bit today. A little tiny bit of administrivia, if you like, about Lottery West. We're 90 years old. We're Australia's only publicly owned lottery. And so what that means is we're not private, we're not in the hands of billionaires or your tax lottos, we're state owned, which means that all available profits go back into the community through our grants. There's nothing other than administration and prize pools that our money goes towards. We fund not-for-profits and local governments. And so what you might hear there is, oh, then we're not eligible. But there's ways to use all of these amazing tools for any kind of project and any kind of grant that you might want to. So that community investment framework on screen was a little bit of I guess, a transition for us to a new way of doing grants. Initially, like most other grant makers, we ticked off at acquittal time on the basis of the fact that you spent your money and you spent it in the way that you said you were going to spend it. So basically, for a long time, that's how granting was done. We didn't ask you really to prove whether or not you'd been successful. We just asked you to tell us how much money you'd spent. Because somewhere in the back of our heads, we thought that money and outcomes went together. But now I think we're a bit more savvy about what an outcome or what an impact on our community really looks like. And it's not really about what you spent your money on, it's about what you've done and what people have actually taken away from those programs and projects. So for us, over I guess the last, well, this guide's been in place for about 6 years, with a bit of a blip in between for COVID where we redirected all funding in a different direction for a little while. But then after we came back, we did a lot of research around this. And what we found was even though we as a grant maker had moved towards an outcomes-based model, our community didn't really understand what that was. And they didn't really understand how to apply, I guess, the concepts around it. So that's where my job was born. And that's where what I'm going to show you next was born, the Community Impact Hub, which is a very cool little resource set and a bunch of tools. And I'm happy to say we're announcing a new one very soon as well, which I'm going to show you how to work through very, very simply. But then I'm going to talk you through how you might apply that in different contexts. So from the perspective of makers or from the perspective of developing a project plan for your community and working together as a team. Alrighty. So I'm going to introduce you to my baby. My baby is called the Community Impact Hub. I love him very much. He's about 2 years old. In fact, he'll he'll clock over He'll clock over 3 years old actually, mid-December. So he'll be a terrible toddler. We'll really enjoy him. And we're also doing some amazing upgrades at the moment to the Community Impact Hub, but what you'll see today is what exists. So I'm not going to talk through the website so much in terms of content because I know you can probably all find your way around a website. I'll just tell you that if you Google Community Impact Hub, it'll be the first thing that pops up on Google. So it's really easy to find. It also doesn't live on the Lottery West website. So if you're in there playing your lotto and you're looking for where this thing lives, it doesn't live there. It's a separate site unto itself because it's really for the community and it's separate from I guess, our games space, if you will. Inside it, there's 3 pillars. There's an understand your community pillar, a learn from others pillar, and a plan your project pillar. I'm going to take you through a few of the bits and pieces that live in there, but I'm going to do that really quickly so we can jump into the tools properly. Now, I'm going to apologize to you very much right now because I'm going to show you my messy desktop so that I can share a different screen with you. Alrighty. Hopefully you haven't seen too much of my messy desktop and now hopefully you can see the fabulous Western Australian Community Impact Hub. Am I right? Thumbs up for that. Sweet. Awesome. So as mentioned, we've got those 3 pillars up the top there. You've got the understand your community, you've got the learn from others, and you've got the plan your project pillar. I'm just going to jump in here for a moment. The reason is there's a tool in here that people often miss, but it's actually really quite powerful if you're looking for data that demonstrates the need in your community that you might be addressing. So a lot of grants particularly, but even a lot of, you might be working with a board or something like that, or an association. A lot of them will ask how you know the need in your community is one that needs addressing, and how do you know that you guys are the right guys to do that? So one of the things in here that I find really helpful, because a lot of small organizations don't have access to buckets and buckets of data, right? But the government does. Let's be real. The government has access to buckets and buckets of data. So what we've done here in the track your community space, so this is in the understand your community pillar. If you scroll down just a little bit, you'll come across track your community. Now, I'm going to make this in our upgrades very, very bright and prevalent because people keep missing it. And as I mentioned, it is quite useful. The Community Inside Australia tool is actually a heat map effectively, but it's a heat map of publicly available data and it's all smushed into one place. So it's really, really useful. I'm going to open it up for you, but just note there's a little manual to click on here. And when you're in the Learn from Others tab, there's also a really cool webinar in the Inside Article space of the lady who built this, walking through how to use it step by step. So I won't spend a whole lot of time, just want to show you what the creature looks like. I'm hoping you can see the Community Insight tool now. Did that click over? Bonus? Lovely. So you'll see a map of Australia. But what I want to show you is the kinds of data that live in here for you should you need them. Now, let's say you were planning a project around education for argument's sake. You might want to jump into education and skills and have a look in your community what the education levels might look like. So you can say, the highest year of school completed, year 10 or below, you can click on that data and you can grab a heat map of that across Western Australia. Across Western Australia and across Australia indeed. But then if you wanted to, you can also go to areas and you can map that to a specific area for yourselves. So if you're a town team and you just want to do that for your specific community, you can put a polygon around your community, or you can click down to your suburb level and you can take it down to that level. So those are pretty cool pieces of information to have your little hot fingers on at any time that you might like them. Now, they're available from a range of different government and non-government websites. You might go to the ABS, you might go to CEFA, you might go to the Mental Health Commission, you might go to the Education Department. But what we've done here is we've put them all in one place, so you don't have to go searching through every dang government website that exists, which I reckon is pretty ace. So I'm going to jump back out of that and back into the hub. I hope we're there. Learn from others pillar. Now, I'm not going to run through all of these, but this is basically the space where either wonderful people like yourselves, when you've finished an amazing project, work with us to build a case study around that project that we can share with everyone else. And that's awesome for our grant seekers and for our broader community, because if they're looking for something that's a little bit similar to the project that they're looking to do, or they're wanting to know who else is working in this space, that's a great place for them to go and have a look at not only what's worked really well, but sometimes what hasn't. You know, it's actually really good to know the perils and pitfalls that people can fall into with these kinds of projects. There's a grant library in there that takes you right back to when we started that the community investment program. So that's right back to 2018. So you can have a look at who's been funded. It's all searchable by keywords. So if you wanted to search mental health, or education or children or something like that, if you've got a specific project, you can have a look at everyone who's been funded by Lottery West over the last 6 odd years in those areas. The insight articles are really cool little learning snapshots. So they range from very, very simplified, what is outcomes-based grant making type stuff, right up to more complex concepts around co-design and collaborating with community and those kinds of things. So there's some ACE articles in there for you to check out. And the reports are reports that grant seekers give us at acquittal time. So it could be research reports, and particularly if it's health or mental health related, they'll quite often be research reports because they'll be in conjunction with unis and things like that. Or it might be an evaluation report because people have done an evaluation on their own project, or it might even be an impact report where they wanted to delve right into the impact of their project, and they share them with us. We share them on the site without editing. So they are as they are when they come to us, and we ask people's permission to load them up there if they're willing to share. And learning opportunities is obviously where you find out about things like this, webinars that you can come along to, workshops when we're running them again next year, that kind of thing. So make sure you check in there every now and then, because we do host metro and regional workshops very, very regularly, but we also do a bi-monthly webinar, and you can subscribe, you can see down here at the bottom, to our bi-monthly newsletter, which will tell you when all those things are happening. But we said we weren't going to spend too much time in the website. I want to spend some time with my favorite bit of the hub, which is the Community Impact Planner. I promised you some nice, simple tools that you can apply to any project that you might like to do. Now, to note, these are absolutely free and they're absolutely secure. If you are playing with these, we can't see what you're doing in the back end at all. The only people who can are the developers, and they don't unless we ask them to retrieve it. So it doesn't live anywhere that Lottery West can go in the back end and have a sneaky peek at what you're doing. Not at all. I can't see it at any time. So, jumping in here, the Community Impact Planner houses three tools. So, a theory of change tool, a logic model or a program logic tool, and an outcomes measurement planner. Now, they all sound horribly complex and academic, and sometimes they can be. So, if I'm really, really honest with you, if you were to go to academia or to a very expensive consultant, let's say, a theory of change might run you up to 30,000 words and $30,000. So, we have created these so that they are ultimately DIYable by anyone. And when I say anyone, we work with organisations at Lottery West who are coming to us for $3,000 and who are very, very small organisations, might just have a couple of volunteers running them, right up to your biggest universities, Royal Flying Doctors Service, TKI, etc., like that. So we do cross the spectrum of multi-million dollar projects right down to tiny $3,000 projects and everything in between. So, what we knew when we sort of did our research around what wasn't really changing in the change to our outcomes based grant making is that people didn't really understand what constitutes an amazing project and how do we communicate that really well to grant funding bodies, to our own communities, to our own boards. So this is what we've tried to do here is hyper simplify some of those tools that can be a little bit complex for your everyday organization. First things first, I'm not going to make you watch the tutorials, but they exist there for you. So if you miss anything I say today, just jump in and have a squiz at these. They're about 1.5 minutes long each, so really easy to follow, and they're step by step. So they take you through everything I'm talking about. But I'm going to jump straight in to I'm ready to start now. I'm going to skip those tutorials again. It really wants you to watch those videos. It's very, very concerned that you do. Now, one of the things, as you can see here, I work with people all the time, so things pre-populate, but often I'll put my name in. And we've got this funny thing that occurs at the moment is that I've done so many workshops over the last couple of years, and quite often I'll put my name in them, that we've seen people uploading their impact plans to our grants with their names on them instead of their project names. So make sure if you are doing this, and particularly if you're submitting it with a grant application as supplementary material, you don't put your name in, you put your project name in. Certainly don't put my name in. Our grants people think it's very hilarious when they see one coming past their desk with their name on it. They're like, oh, this is one of ours. It's very, very funny. All right, so jumping into a theory of change, and again, it's very concerned that you watch that little video, but I'm not going to. I'm going to bounce past it. For us, a theory of change is really simple. It's basically an articulation of your vision. So I'll show you a couple of examples here of sort of how complex we really expect them to be. So you can see here, it's not massively complex to get to. But one of the things I am going to say to you, and I'll click through to environmental examples as well, so you can see what that might look like, and a health example there. So something like that too. Now, what I will say with this is I don't usually go to this one first. I don't usually do this tool first in the list, even though it comes up first in the list. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason for me is that it can be much more simple and clear for you to articulate a vision when you've got your project stepped out in a really logical way. When you know how you're going to get from issue to impact in a really nice stepped out way where you've got everything nice and tidy in front of you, creating this vision is that much easier. But the other reason I don't do it up front usually is because I don't know if any of you have sat in a room with a team or a group of counsellors or a board and tried to wordsmith a vision statement. It's a fun exercise. Sometimes 3 sentences can take you 3 hours just because everybody wants to have their way of articulating a thing. So I find it a lot easier when you've actually got that project fleshed out in front of you. So I'm going to jump straight to the logic model. And again, wants you to watch those videos, very concerned about it. But this is what that looks like. So this is how complex this is for you. It's a series of boxes, really, simple as. So basically these series of boxes you fill in, and once you have, and particularly for Lottery West, That's a skeleton of a grant application because it's effectively a beautiful, elegant, simple project plan which lays out everything that you need to tell a grant assessor or to tell potentially your board what your project's going to look like. So, from that perspective, all we need to do in here is jump in, pop up in the little question marks in the corner if you want a little bit more information about what that looks like. But the first thing we want to identify is what is that issue or opportunity in your community that you're responding to. It might be something around, local litter. It might be something around tree canopies. It might be something around mental health. It might be something around homelessness. There are any number of amazing things that you could address. But what I will say is, particularly when you're coming to a grant funding body, the two things you need to tell us are what is the issue and how do you know it's one. So you can't just tell us, hey, we want to solve this issue in our community if you can't prove to us that it is an issue that needs solving. So that's really one of the first things I want you to sort of keep in the back of your mind. So let's say Mel is hangry as she has no cake. Terrible state of affairs. But how do we know this is true? There has to be some evidence or some statistics behind that would tell us why that is true. What if we say there is increased biting incidents reported at local hospital? Now, I'm just being absolutely silly, as you can tell, but that's how we might evidence that. Now, you can use those statistics that we saw in that first tool, the Community Insights Australia tool, to find some evidence if you don't have any in your back pocket. So smaller organisations who might not have done a whole bunch of community engagement previously or might not have access to some of that health research or things like that, you can go into that tool and find the health research that might surround this from your community's perspective. Now, inputs is exactly what you think it is. It's all the resources you need to make a project sing. We've popped a few popular options down there. They're just thought triggers for you to think about, okay, what are all the things that we might need to make this project work? My suggestion here is even if you're doing this for a grant organisation and you know that they're only going to fund a certain amount of things, still flesh this out for your whole project. Don't think of it as just what you're asking your grant seeker for. Think of it as your project resources. So let's say we needed some educational materials. We were going to create an educational program about Hangry Mel. We might also need some infrastructure. We probably need to hire an oven. We definitely need some volunteers for that bake sale. But the first thing that we do really want to do is make sure that we have the thing we're asking our grant organisations for, which is money. Now, what I want to show you in here, which is pretty cool, is you can actually move these around. And my suggestion would be once you've popped your resources in and you're going, yep, I feel like that's a fairly complete list, move them around in order of priority. Oops, this one. So let's say funding is the first thing you need because if you don't have your funding, you can't run your project. If that's the case, put your funding up top. So make sure you've prioritised. Let's say volunteers, you desperately need your volleys because if you don't have your volleys, you don't have a project. So you're going to put your human resources up top as well. And then you might put your stuff and things that you need down the bottom. Because the bottom line is oftentimes with stuff and things, we think we need money for them, but sometimes the community actually has ownership of these things. Or you might find someone in your community who's willing to lend. Let's say you went to your local government and said, hey, we need a kitchen for a day. Do you think you could sponsor us that as part of this project? And they might say yes, so you can put that in your in-kind inputs rather than in your funding amount. Next one you'd go through to is activities. And so again, we've dropped a few thought provokers down the bottom there. So you might want to train some staff around your project. You might also want to obtain permits and approvals, particularly if you've got any food stuffs going on. You're going to need to check in with your local gov around that. You might need to deliver a program or some services. Let's say we're going to deliver our bake sale so that Mel is no longer biting people, etc., etc. So we're building that storyline. I'm going to jump to impacts now, though, because these two words are similar words that mean quite different things from Lottery West perspective. So that's why I'm just sort of scooching over to impacts first. Now, you'll note here down below, we've got impacts already listed. These are the ones that correlate with our community investment framework. So these are specifically Lottery West's impact areas. Now, you don't have to use these. These are, if you are coming to Lottery West for a grant, you do need one of these. But if you're not, you can put your own in. It could be anything. But let's just say we wanted an inclusive, thriving WA community because really, who doesn't? So we've got a Lottery West impact in there. Now, my suggestion is always, I would say 99% of the time, it would be a really good idea to also have an impact that's just yours, that isn't about meeting your funding body's expectations. Because you're not only reporting to a funding body, you're reporting to your community, potentially to your local government, maybe to your own board or association. So you're going to want something in there that's just about you. So you might want a bite free WA. There we go. We've got one that's specific to our project. We're not biting anyone. We love this. Then we're going to go back to outcomes. I'm backtracking here. Now, again, you saw those 14 outcomes that were sitting underneath the priority areas in our community investment framework. These are they. And these actually correlate to the priority areas. So they were sitting underneath the priority areas. Of course, I know them by heart. So I know that raised community connection and participation sits under an inclusive, thriving WA community. But after that, you can choose any outcome that you want to. You need a primary outcome if you're coming to us for funding that correlates with that impact area. But after that, choose any you like. I know that I'm much more mentally healthy when I have cake. So let's say we're choosing a healthway outcome there because we can. And the other thing that I would also say again is that you want a project or an organization specific outcome, at least one, if not more. So let's say we want a happier, less hungry Mel. Easy done. So we've got a project specific outcome there. Now, why are outputs and outcomes different? To Lottery West, an outcome is the difference that you're going to make in a place or a community when your project is successful. So this outcome is around difference made. So it's really more your qualitative, I guess, investment, if you like. But where we go over here, when we talk about outputs, I talk about outfits a lot, but when you talk about outputs from Lottery West perspective, we're really talking about stats. Let's be real. We're talking about numbers. So we're talking about how many people came to your bake sale, or we're talking about how many programs you delivered, or how many meetings you had, or how many cupcakes you baked. So let's say in here we're going to do baked 500 cupcakes, had 500 attendees, made $100. I don't know, making that up. But what we're doing here is we're actually looking for the statistical, I guess, foundation for your impacts. So you're telling your grant maker, these are what we're projecting, because these are not what you know. Particularly if it's a grant organisation or it's a grant funding bid, you're looking into the future. You're going, we're hoping we're going to bake 500 cupcakes. We're hoping to have 500 attendees. And these are the things that at acquittal time, you'll be measuring against. So make sure you sort of don't get too gung-ho in overblowing how much you expect and how much you're projecting. The other things we pop in here, nice and simple, assumptions. Assumptions for us is around what is the environment you are working in that's going to make your project sing? So you might have some enabling factors. Let's say you have a supportive local government and you have 20 active volunteers and you have a great cake maker, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got some assumptions that you know that you can call on to make your project successful. But then we might pop over here into risk. Now, the risk can also be almost the inverse, if you like, of your assumptions. Let's say the local government decides it's not going to give you any funding. So LGA pulls funding. Let's say, oh, not fuming, we pull funding. Let's see how many spelling mistakes I've made so far. Let's say our volunteer base is dwindling. So these might be some of the risks that you might face. You might have decided you were going to do an amazing outdoor bake sale in June. So we might need to go for inclement weather. Oh, and she has made a typo again. So these kinds of things might be the risks that you're looking at for your project. Now, one thing we do know is that a lot of people who are coming through to grant organisations don't really love talking about risk. They don't love talking about risk for two reasons. They think that a grant funding body will see your organisation as risky or your project as risky. Now, that's not why we ask this. We actually ask this because demonstrating that you've thought about risk shows us that you're a mature organisation or association that is actually looking into the future and forecasting things that they might need to mitigate. So it's not about us being punitive with you, and we're not out there going, oh, this is a risky project, don't know if we're going to fund it. We're out there going, excellent, they've thought about this. But if you still feel a little uncomfortable, you can do this. You can actually pop your mitigation strategy straight in this section. So you can go inclement weather, we move bake sale to town hall. Easy. So what you've done there is you've actually assured your funding body that not only have you thought about risk, you've also thought about your mitigation strategy. So you're ahead of the game. So then we'll jump into the next tool, which is called an outcomes measurement plan. Now, an outcomes measurement plan or framework is really just the way you are going to measure your success over time. And one thing that often project designers do, and sometimes do really badly, is they forget to measure things until the end of their project. So they do their project, they're implementing this amazing program or project over time. But then at the end of it, when they come to acquittal or reporting time, they're like, oh dear, we haven't got any stats. We haven't got anything that shows how many people came along. We haven't got anything that shows anyone whether they enjoyed the event. That kind of thing doesn't get picked up until the very end. And I don't know if you guys know this, but I personally know how hard it is to send out a survey or something like that 3 months after a project is finished. You get so little back, it's almost not worth writing the survey. So for me, it's always worth thinking about how you're going to measure these things right throughout your project delivery. So that's what you can do here. So you can see that the outcomes that you popped in your amazing logic model have pulled in. And then all you need to do here is design an indicator that demonstrates change. So what is the measure that you're going to use to show us that you have created change in your community? Let's say down here, we were looking for increased volunteer participation. And this one's a nice, easy one. How might you measure that? Well, if you've got a volunteer log, or a volunteer register, which most people do. If you started with a volunteer register with 10 people on it and you ended your project with 20 people on it, then you have just won that game. So what you might want to do, however, is make sure, because we do need a baseline to measure against always, so you need to know where you've started in order to know whether you've improved. But then you might want to go for a bit of a measure midway through your project. If it's something that's happening over time, if it's something that's just a one-off event, that might be a bit more difficult. But let's say you're delivering a program of events. You might want to, midway through your project, do a bit of a taster of how many volleys have you got now? Is it 15 when you're aiming for 20? Well, then that's ace, you're on track. But is it only 11 when you're aiming for 20? In which case, do you need to sort of think of some new ways to attack your volunteer sort of engagement programs? So those are the kinds of things that good measurement can do for you. It can show you in real time whether or not you're on the right path to achieve your outcomes. And then, of course, you might want to also measure that at the end of your project so that when you're doing your reporting, you can pull that all together nice and easily. But what I'm saying here, I guess, is you don't need to create a new measurement tool to measure these things. These are some of the things that you've probably already got in your organisation. You're probably already collecting as information. So you'd save that indicator. Now you can do another indicator for that one if you want to, but I won't. I'll jump on in here. We'll do one for here. Now I know if I've got lots of cake, I have increased overall satisfaction, but you might need a different kind of tool for this. So it's something like a poll or a survey might be really good for collecting information around increased life satisfaction. Were people happier after your event than they were before? And then you might want to go, hey, I think I can only really do that at an event. So that would be an as required kind of measurement. But at least if you plan for it, you can do things like dropping that into your Outlook calendar at the various times and gateways that you want to remind yourself to collect that info. And it really doesn't have to be complex. You could even do something like that with a photography project. So observational or anecdotal, little testimonials from people who have attended your event. That's absolutely fine. So don't think that something like a Lottery West is expecting you to do massive research papers here. We're absolutely not. And depending on the size of your project, we are expecting quite a small amount of detail there. So I'm going to just save and continue to review just to show you what that all looks like. So you can see that what you end up with here is a lovely PDF effectively. You can export each of these sections separately if you want your logic model and your outcomes measurement framework separately to keep them separated for yourselves, or you can do that all together as one big PDF. And you can see here that we didn't complete the first one, so there's nothing in there just yet. But if we did that, they would all populate. Then you save and export. What you get when you save and export is you get a link to your downloadable PDF. So you can download that and print it out if you'd like to, pop it next to your computer. You also get an editable link. And what that means is that you can go back in any time and you can change your plan or add to your plan. Or you can even use that as your draft and then come together with your team and use it as almost a spitballing, brainstorming opportunity to come together and see if you've missed anything that might be good to have in there. So when that comes to you though, the one thing I will say, remember how I said this is very secure and we can't see anything in the back end. What I will say to you is if you're looking for feedback, send out your PDF, don't send out your link. Because if you do send out your link, whoever has access to that link can put stuff into it and you may not be able to get back to your original version. So if you're sending out your PDF, just get people to pop the comments directly into the PDF through Adobe and then consolidate them into your link. Or open the link up within a team and actually scribe into it as people are working with you, which is actually quite fun. I actually do it quite a lot with different organizations. I'll come out and do one-on-one sort of organizational project development workshops, and we do this together as a team. And I'll scribe as people are giving me ideas. We'll drop it all in, then we'll move it all around. Then I'll give it back to them and they can take it away and do any further editing that they want to. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And come back to you for any questions around that. Before I do, though, one thing that I will say that I think needs to be kept in the back of mind, and actually, no, I might even share this with you. I'll go back. Hopefully, I still have it to share with you. Oh, I don't at the moment. Unfortunately, my slideshow has disappeared itself. How very rude of it. But what I will say to you is this is all proportional. And when I say this is proportional, what effectively I'm saying is never collect more data than you need to and never collect data that doesn't actually meet an outcome for you. So if you've got your outcomes clearly articulated, only collect evidence that's relevant to them. I think a lot of organisations get a little bit frightened by the idea that now grant bodies are expecting evidence and that they have to have all of these different kinds of ways to collect evidence. If you're only asking for 10K or something like that from a grants body, we're not expecting you out there, doing a survey every time you meet someone. We really are just expecting a nice low level of evidence collection. And what I will do is I'll share with Patricia my slide deck from this so that she can share it with you all because it has a little bit more information about proportionality of evidence, particularly pertaining to Lottery West. So I'm open to questions if anyone has some. Yes.
So much, Mel. That was amazing.
Awesome. Fun tools? Look easy. I hope they look easy. Please jump in with questions.
trying to unmute myself.
There you are. Awesome.
Thank you, Mel, and thank you, Patricia, for bringing this to us. So I'm here representing a newly formed multicultural body in
Excellent.
Port Hedland. We are just the 7 volunteers. All of us have full-time jobs, and we just like most of us are women. We have families and kids, so this is very helpful information because it gives us some sort of a roadmap to go ahead. Now we are hoping to have a multicultural evening next year, and we're giving ourselves time, like a couple of months, because December and Jan really goes very quickly. Anyways,
Wow.
the question, I have two different questions. One is that we might need marketing materials like banners or like a media book wall, table covers. Now these are used, can be reused. So when we have no money at this stage, we are pooling in our own money. That's the situation we are in. But when we apply for a grant for a and the project is one event, can we still apply for things like merchandise or marketing material which can be used further?
You certainly can. Yes, you certainly can. Absolutely. And a lot of sort of events grants, particularly that come through to Lottery West, do ask for a marketing budget that can be used for printed materials and those kinds of things. So yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage you to even go through the impact planning process and have a chat to one of our grants development officers. Are you set up as a not-for-profit?
Yes, we are. So we
Bonus.
set up as a not-for-profit and it's an incorporated body. We were very
Perfect.
careful with that because there are other groups or cultural groups, but they aren't getting grants or they aren't able to have that sort of an impact that you want because you can't go to anyone if you can't handle your money or
That's
can't be
right.
made accountable for it. So that is very,
Absolutely.
and also there is no longevity. Like then it depends on the people rather than on the organization itself. So that was
Yes.
really intentional. But yes,
Brilliant.
so just to answer your question, yes, we are
Brilliant.
forming.
Yeah, that's excellent. So you're in a really good space, which is excellent. So yeah, more than happy. And as I mentioned, I do one-on-one support for these things. So if you have done some thinking around the event that you want to produce and those kinds of things, I'm more than happy to sort of make some time with you and go through that.
Oh, thank you, Mel. That would be excellent.
No
That would
drama.
be excellent. The other question is now I have two questions, like two more. One is that in terms of training, can that also become part of the grant?
That's a really good question. And
Because we are all new and like, uh,
it depends on who you're training. So, and that's a really tricky one for a lot of grant makers. We, Lottery West, under our act, can't fund what they call operational funding, which means we can't fund your staffing and
understood.
those kinds of things. Having said that, if you're looking to train volunteers, that's a different conversation. So we can't sort of train your internal staff, but we can train people who might be working with you to deliver things externally. Does that make sense?
It does. And in that sense, we have no employees. We are all volunteers. We don't get paid.
Well, then it's quite possible that if you had that conversation with one of our grants developments team, if you knew what sort of training you were looking for and that kind of stuff, you might be able to fold that into the grant. So it's definitely worth a conversation.
Okay, fantastic. That's good to know. And lastly, in terms of collecting outcomes, yes, you covered that photographic evidence is also an outcome, and especially
Mm,
for little ones like us, as in we are hoping to deliver big impact because we have big community, we have a very big what do you say, multicultural community in a small town.
yeah.
However, we are still small because
Yes.
we're just us, but photographic evidence, fantastic.
Yeah.
In terms of surveys, how do we like, has it all got to be sent as an email link or how will that work?
There's lots and lots of different ways, and I'd suggest having a look on our Inside Articles pages too, because we've written a lot around these sorts of things. But The way you collect data and evidence, some of that is a little bit dependent on how much money you're asking for. So from our perspective, particularly. So if it's not a massive grant, then in terms of the volume of data we would expect or evidence, it might just be as simple as, asking people their opinion at an event. So, popping up to them with your phone and saying, would you mind giving us a short quote about how you found this event? That kind of thing. If it's a little bit larger or a bit more, if it's a $500,000 grant or something that big, then of course we would be looking for a lot more detail. But yeah, at the lower end of town, we're really looking for some anecdotal evidence, which can be conversations with the community, or it can be you've got your phone there and you've got a little poll, a 3-question poll where they can tick yes or no while you're standing with them. Those kinds of things are enough. So
Yes.
yeah, don't be too caught up in thinking it has to be very complex.
No, thank you. That is very helpful because we think when it's Lotteries West that it is very complex because of the largesse of what the
Yeah.
impact that you deliver
Yes, and I mean,
everywhere.
it's a large organisation that gives away large amounts of money. But to be honest with you, most of our grants actually go to small to medium groups. So even though we do give some very large grants away to big organisations, predominantly we're focused on those small to medium outcomes because they're actually more impactful as an
They're very,
aggregate than the large ones are.
they're very grassroots, exactly that. They're very grassroots.
Yeah.
In terms of anecdotal responses, would you need a name? And that would be enough.
We We prefer, and it depends on who you're working with. We obviously work with a lot of FDV organisations, homelessness organisations, and we always say absolutely de-identified data. Never, never give us names, and we will never publish names. However, if you've got people who are quite happy to, put, Mel B from Port Hedland, then that's absolutely fine too. But that's a consent thing. So you just need to make sure that you've asked consent to publish names.
Understood. Thank you very much. That's all for me. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Anyone else with
Okay.
interesting thoughts?
We have Nasreen raising hand.
Hi, Nazreen. How can I help?
Hello. Thank you so much, Mel. It was very useful. My first question is, do I need to set up a not-for-profit,
Well,
or
in
is it
order to, I
possible to
mean,
just
not to
go
use
without?
the tools are yours for whatever you want to use them for, but to come to Lottery West specifically for funding, we only actually fund not-for-profits and local governments. So to come for us for funding, you would need to be a not-for-profit, yes. Having said that, if you're looking for funding from other organisations, that's not always the case. It's just under our legislation, that's our box that we have to tick. But let's say you were going to Cultural Industries, Tourism and Sport, or OMI, Office of Multicultural Interests or Communities, their grants might not actually specify that you need to be a not-for-profit.
Okay, thanks. And so my next question is about volunteers. You mentioned that we should, as one of our inputs, or I don't know, the requirements, we can say that we need volunteers. Then what does that mean? Do they help us getting volunteers?
Well, no, I mean, effectively, what you're saying in your resources section there or in your input section is you're saying how many people you need to deliver your project. Now, if you don't have the volunteers that you need to deliver your project, potentially part of your project could be your engagement strategy to get more volunteers. So that might be what you'd be looking at folding into your grant application is that you're going to design an engagement strategy to get more volunteers into your organisation. So that's the way I would treat that. But what you do need to be really, I guess, careful of is making sure that if you're doing a project, you do have the human resourcing in place to deliver it because every grant organisation will ask you your capacity to deliver. So what that effectively means is if you've only got one staff member in your organisation and you're pretty dependent on your volunteers to deliver a lot of the services in your community or the events or whatever you're delivering, then you need to be making sure that either you've got those or you're finding a way and creating a way to bring those into your organisation.
Thank you. So you raised another question for me. So if, let's say, I set up a not-for-profit, then I will be the staff. But what does the staff mean? Do staff need to be paid if I want to have another staff, for example?
Technically, no. Technically, we do occasionally give grants to organisations that are entirely run by volunteers. A lot of our church groups that deliver CER are entirely staffed, or I should say, crisis and emergency relief. So, sort of food packages and those kinds of things. They are often entirely volunteer staff. So, you don't have to have paid staff on your payroll. What Lottery West can't do, however, is fund operational funding. So if you do have paid staff on your payroll who are there on your payroll to deliver your organisation's objectives, we can't staff them specifically. Having said that, and there are ways to look at this in different ways, contract staff are a possibility. So for Lottery West specifically, while we won't staff the staff in your organisation unless they're specifically carved out to deliver just that project, we could potentially staff a contractor, so a volunteer management coordinator or an event management coordinator or a marketing officer if you don't have those people on staff and need them. So what's critical to understand about that with our grants, though, is that it's only for the term of the grant. So they are contracted to the end of your grant funding, and after that, if you wanted to keep them in your organisation, you would have had to found your ways to sustain your pathway to sustainability. So your way to manage their payment from there. The other thing I'd say to Nazreen about setting up a not-for-profit is that in general, when not-for-profits are very new and they're entirely sort of volunteer-led, Lottery West probably wouldn't allocate large amounts of money in that first sort of ask. Now, it doesn't mean you wouldn't get any, but you do have to be registered for GST to ask for more than 15 grand. Or you can be auspiced through another organisation, and that means they manage the money side of things, but you manage the delivery side of things. So those are just some things to keep in the back of your head. In my little slide deck, which I will send through to Patricia, she will forward on to you guys, and it has a little bit more information about our eligibility criteria, because that's not really my area, but I will share some with you.
Thank you so much. Can I ask my last question?
Sure.
So regarding volunteers, there's a position called casual volunteer. Is that correct?
I don't know, actually. To be honest, I am not too au fait with volunteer rules. I think a casual volunteer would be someone, and I'm just thinking back to my partner's involvement at Red Cross, would be somebody who just comes in on an as needs basis. So somebody who's called in to do occasional tasks. But don't call me on that. I come from a capacity building, not a volunteer perspective.
You know why I asked? Because I volunteered for a community-based, or it was a language school, and then they asked me to be the main teacher. After a while, they asked me to be the main teacher and come every week. So I worked like a staff for them, but the contract was a casual volunteer, and they paid me a little amount for that, the hours that I worked only. So, and also in another group that I volunteered, they said there is a little payment called honorarium. And so these kind of payments, are they covered by grants if we want to apply for a
I wouldn't have
grant?
said so. No, in general, we can't, I don't think we can do that. There might be, that would be a conversation you'd have to have with one of our grant development officers, but off top of head, from an eligibility perspective, I'm not certain that we would ever be able to pay volunteers through grants. That's not a hard and fast rule that I'm positive about, though, so I would definitely check that one with a grants development officer from an eligibility perspective.
Yes,
Thank you
usually
so
with
much.
grants, volunteers are people who contributing their time and skills for free to
Yeah.
make the project happen and benefit their community. But it's also everything depends of the project and really what the grant is for. But I would like to make a comment here on the tool. Actually, it's a great tool which Mel was sharing. You can establish your vision, which will help you with applying for funding. So really your strategic planning. You can use these tools which will help you to define your vision mission and will assist you even with creating website, but then writing about your organization, really your vision and how this project meet your vision and also the objectives of the grant.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Pretty amazing. On the feedback, I post in the chat link to survey, and I will appreciate if you could complete it. We have 1 or 2 minutes to go. Any last questions to Mel? No. And also on the Lottery West funding application is quite straightforward. And if you're familiar with this tool, I think, it will help you to plan. And as Ambika mentioned, because we think Lottery West, a lot of requirements, paperwork and evidence, but to be honest, it's quite friendly application and the process. So I would recommend to have a look, think about your project, play with these tools because as Mel said, it's for you. No one will see what you're doing behind, but you can create even like a dummy project for now to build your confidence and skills when you're going to apply for funding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say our tool from a Lottery West perspective is actually built around our application process. So if you're really good at using the tool, you can copy paste a lot of that straight into your application and just flesh it out a bit. So it kind of exists as a skeleton for your application. And again, as I mentioned before, always an offer to be in contact with me if you need sort of hand holding through the process. More than happy to run that.
Yeah, pretty amazing tool. Thank you so much, Mel. And it's free. That's another thing. You don't have
We
to
love
pay
free.
consultants. You can use this tool for free. I also posted in the chat few other websites with free resources you can access. So please feel free to browse through them. And if no final questions, no questions? No questions. Thank you so much, Mel. It was absolutely amazing. Like really, quick session to take us through the tools. This recording, as well as Mel's presentation, will be available on Act Local website in training and events, so you can access it at any time and share with your team. And in the survey, if you can also let us know what else would you like us to cover, we'll be really grateful. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you so much, Mel. It was amazing.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you, everyone. And our contact details are at the end. Rory, would you mind to take last slide? If you would like to contact us, please feel free to go on this website. There will be our email addresses. You also should have my email address if you register to this webinar. Any questions, let us know. And thank you so much, everyone, for your amazing work for your communities. We really appreciate it. And please have a play with these tools.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.